Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Reckless Talk, our TTRPG interview show, where we sit down with some of our favorite writers, players, GMs, and streamers to get to know a little bit more about what makes them who they are. I am, as always, your host, GM Nathan. I use he, him pronouns, and this week we are joined by the polyhyphenate TTRPG powerhouse known best as Drakoniques. They do a little bit of almost everything in the tabletop space. Well, a lot of almost everything. He has performed in, produced for, and wrote a ton of diverse projects over the last few years, including stints on My First Dungeon, Unprepared Casters, and the recently concluded Planet Arcana miniseries A Fool's Errand. They've also written on several tabletop projects, including an adventure for the Doctor Who Roleplaying Game, Fat Magic, and the Deimos Academy. And they are an accomplished producer, putting together the genuinely excellent Beyond the Brook miniseries among, and stop me if you've heard this before already, many, many other cool projects. I could genuinely go on for an embarrassing amount of time listing off all of his work across basically all stages of the TTRPG sphere, but I'd rather talk a bit about all the amazing perspective and experience that they shared in this interview. They are so wonderfully open about combating social anxiety, the power of compliments, the essential skills of asking for help, and finding playground joy with your friends. Drac comes off as an unbelievably hardworking, thoughtful, and joyful person in what they do at and away from the table. And I came away from this conversation feeling inspired to do, well, so many things, but particularly to be more curious, be more vulnerable, and do more cool stuff with cool people. I can't keep talking because, well, we still have a whole episode ahead. So as always, if you enjoyed this chat, please go check out some of our other Reckless Talk interviews and maybe even our actual play episodes. We have links to the things that Drac and I talk about in the show notes. Please go check one of the amazing productions that they've taken part in to get a better idea of all his awesome work. With that, I'll see you next time. Enjoy. Hello, Drac.
Hi.
This is how we start. I warned you going in that it's lightly abrupt, but we've started the show. It's official now. So lovely to see you. Hello.
Hi. It's good to be here, honestly.
And hopefully in our mutual joy and enthusiasm, we will produce something that other people will be excited about instead of only the two of us. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited. A little bit nervous, I'll admit. I think I always get a little bit nervous at the beginning of these kind of stuff, but I'm excited as well.
It is an inherently strange thing to do.
Yeah.
That was a big motivator for me starting the show, is because people don't usually get the opportunity to just blab about themselves and what they think and like.
Yeah.
Well, for anyone who is not me, who may not be as familiar with all the things that you do, of which there is a true glut of content and activity in your tabletop role-playing game life, could you tell any errant listeners who you are, what you have done, what they might know you from, all that good stuff?
Yeah. I'm Drac, or Drakoniques. Find me on all socials at Drakoniques. It's Drakoniques. It's he, they pronouns. And I'm a TTRPG everything, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yes.
I do actual play production. I perform in actual plays. I do a little bit of GMing. Haven't done any on stream yet, but maybe soon will. And I do TTRPG writing as well.
It was a robust research process for you, because it wasn't just, I have to watch a lot of shows that they program, that they were a part of, but also of I have to figure out what shows they were producing on. And also I have to read these 3 adventures that they wrote and all this other stuff. So it was a fun, kind of variety of things, truly diving into your scope of work.
Thank you for going through that much effort.
I mean, it is mostly due to personal anxiety, right? Of like, well, if I don't know everything about this person, then obviously I'm going to make a fool of myself and, be ostracized for the rest of time. So
I barely know anything about myself, so I think you're good.
Well, this will be a very interesting mutual exploration into the tabletop past, present, and future of you. But we don't, on this show, I said past, present, and future. We don't worry about the present or the future up top. We barely care about most of the past up front. No. We go to the beginning. We start at the inciting incident of either, kind of however you want to define it, wherever is most true to your own personal journey, how you got introduced to tabletop role-playing games and or, kind of nerd stuff in general.
Yeah. Gosh, how long ago was I? It has to be maybe now. I feel like it has to be 6 years, maybe 7 years ago. I've heard like about D&D. Like, I think it's kind of hard not to hear about D&D if you're not in the TTRPG space. So I'd heard about it, but it was very much like the stereotypical nerddom of like, these are what like the geek of the geeks play. Like the nerd.
I'm too cool for this. Thank you.
I'm too cool for this. This is what the people who play this are the ones you see in movies like getting swirlies by the jocks.
Yes.
So I had no intention of learning about D&D. I had no intention of doing anything TTRPG related. I didn't know enough about TTRPGs and D&D in general to really have any opinions about it. It was just a thing that's happening in the background. But I used to watch a lot of YouTube, and I just fell asleep with a Markiplier video going on. And then when I woke up, autoplay had shuffled. Like I'd gone through the Markiplier video and ended up in the middle of Geek and Sundry's Foreververse. It was a campaign run by Ivan Van Norman, and it was basically like it was like an actual play where they would change systems every like couple of arcs, right, and like would explain it as them going through different universes, which was very cool. I remember watching it being like, what is this? This seems weird. We're just seeing people are rolling dice and pretending around each other. It's so weird. And honestly, I probably would have switched away from it if it wasn't for the fact that Trisha Hirschberger was one of the players in it. And Trisha was in another YouTube channel that I really enjoyed called SourceFed. I was like, okay, cool. This is like a thing I've never seen Trisha do. I want to keep watching this and figure this out. And very quickly just fell in love with actual plays. So I went from Foreververse, finishing off the Foreververse, to watching Eric Campbell's, I believe it was called Shield of Tomorrow. Yeah, Shield of Tomorrow, which was a Star Trek campaign that Eric Campbell on Geek and Sundry ran. And I became obsessed with that. I went through all of Eric Campbell's like other shows they've done. They did Eric's TBD RPG, which is where they played. It was meant to be, I think, a variety like TTRPG show. But I ended up playing just the Doctor Who TTRPG. And that's when I learned about that system. And I was obsessed with that because I was already a big Doctor Who fan before.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was one nerd allowance.
Yeah.
You'd allowed yourself at that point. Got it.
Then from there, I watched another thing that Garrett GN, which was called Callisto 6, which is a superhero campaign, which again, like, I loved superheroes. So I was like, you can be a superhero in these things as well. It isn't just like fantasy. So I became really obsessed with actual plays through watching a lot of them. But then I think I made the shift of actually wanting to play them when I watched Hyper RPG's Kolok 1991. It was Kids on Bikes, I believe. Yeah, Kids on Bikes, with some homebrew elements, I can only assume. But it was essentially like a mystery, dark fantasy campaign with a bunch of like ciphers and hidden messages and stuff. Like, it was very much a thing that watching it was fun, but after you've watched it, there's so much to think about and like decipher and like encode, which is I just own decode, which I loved. And then Abria Iyengar was in it. It was in season 2 of it. And I think seeing Abria's character kind of made something click for me, because Abria's character was like, Abria as a whole, I think everyone knows, has a presence.
Oh yeah.
There is no way Abria can play a background character. And that was very much clear with Abria's character in Kolok 1991. And I think watching like a black creator take up so much space so profoundly made something like click in the back of my mind of like, oh, I'm not satisfied with just watching. I want to be on this. I want to do this.
Was the click, I want to be on screen doing this, or I want to play tabletop role-playing games?
I want to play tabletop role-playing games. Yeah. It was definitely like a case of like, I want to play this. The switch to actually streaming it was truly the pandemic.
Stop me if you've heard this before. 2020 hit, and then people had a little bit more time on their hands and were a lot more online than they once were, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I had joined my D&D club at my university, and we were playing fairly consistently. And then literally like a month later, the pandemic hit. So we couldn't play together in person anymore. And then we tried to play it online, but not many people had the setup to really do it without it being like really kind of hard and honestly kind of grating to do. So then that game just kind of fizzled away and died out. And I just needed like kind of my fix, my TTRPG fix. So I actually don't remember how I found the channel, but there's a channel was doing like a casting call, not like an official casting call. It's kind of like a thing like anyone in the community, we're going to run a game for people in the community. And I was like, I'll try this out. I'll play. And it was a indie game called Medical Bay 3. And it was essentially a space opera plus a like hospital show kind of drama.
Obsessed. Like I'm already like starting to like pull up a separate window on my computer to be like, well, Drax talking, I should probably learn about this too, just for context, not for any other reason.
It was a lot of fun. We essentially played like alien doctors. Not all of us were aliens, some of us were humans, but basically space doctors. Yeah. In a space hospital. And we'd have to like diagnose patients and help them out and go through like it was like a medical space drama. And I remember doing the game, and I was so nervous. I'd streamed a little bit of like classic video games on Twitch. Like if you go on my Twitch account, you can probably find old VODs of Baby Drac.
The hidden, the dark videos from the before times.
Yeah. So I had some experience being on camera, but like essentially acting on camera was new to me. I had pretty intense stage fright, social anxiety. I still do to an extent, but it was pretty bad. And that's honestly why I started streaming video games in the first place, to like kind of exposure therapy myself out of having that anxiety. But then acting and performing is a whole different beast.
For sure. And had you done any performance or anything like that beforehand?
I'm one of the few people in my family who has no performing background
until the last 4 years.
Yeah. So I remember being really nervous before this game, and I was like, I don't know what my character's personality would be. I don't know anything really about my character. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to play a nervous doctor because I'm nervous. I'm just going to lean into it and just pretend that this is all just acting, whereas I'm actually nervous. I am really terrified right now.
Absolutely. Take from what you know, et cetera, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So we played through it, and afterwards, one of the players of the game, their name was Jen. They were like, I loved playing with you. Do you want to like play with us again on this other channel that I'm a part of? I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And then that was kind of like my entrance into the TTRPG space of like playing more frequently on platforms as a performer.
It just like all clicked.
Yeah.
It seems like it was very much like a cascade of just like, well, I'll play on this one thing, and then oops, now this is what I did.
Yep. Yeah, it became an obsession very quickly.
I know that, kind of you started to get involved in creating your own channels and that kind of stuff. And maybe that this is kind of the pivot towards that. But was there a point for you other than, again, oh, hey, here's a way for me to get my fix, and it seems like people are being nice about playing with me, and I'd like to do more of that, where it went from that, oh, this is just kind of a fun experience, fun hobby, fun way to express myself, to, oh, I'm doing this like publicly, primarily, and really getting into it as more than just, kind of a for fun hobby. Hopefully it's still a fun hobby, but you get what I mean.
Yeah. I think there was definitely like a flip. It was, God, I think when it came to like actually performing, the kind of flip from it being just a hobby to wanting to make it like Not career, because I'll be honest, it's nowhere near a career. It's definitely not a career. But like a bit more than a hobby was honestly probably, oh God, I don't know. I think it was like a gradual thing.
That's totally legitimate, where it just happens. Like, that's a very real human experience.
Yeah, I think it just kind of happened. I knew it could be more than just a hobby after, I don't know how active they are now, but there was like a channel called Utopia, which was a kind of POC-led, POC-focused TTRPG kind of group and channel. Yeah. And I remember being invited to a game one day, like for, I think, was it for Gen Con? I think it was for like a Gen Con thing. It was like streamed on the Gen Con channel, and Utopia was like organizing it. And I remember playing it, having so much fun. I think we played Kids on Bikes as well. And it was Kids on Brooms specifically. We were playing like magical teens, which was a lot of fun. And I remember leaving the game being like, oh, that was fun. Okay, next to the next project. And then them reaching out to me being like, okay, cool. So what's your PayPal? And I was like, PayPal? What do you mean PayPal? They're like, yeah,
I understand those two words separately, but when you put them together, I don't. Sorry.
Yeah.
What?
I was like, yeah, I mean, I have one. Why do you need it? They're like, we're going to pay you for your performance. I'm like, this is the thing you can get paid for? That's the thing? I remember that shift being very apparent, being like, oh, I could be like being paid to do this and also paying people to do this.
Yeah.
So that's one like flip I can remember happening. Totally. That definitely like affected my desire, I suppose, to do it more than just a hobby. But a kind of like definitive flip, I can't say for sure. I think it was like a gradual thing.
Absolutely, for sure. So we'll get into this is something that I can get paid and pay people to do portion of your life in a little while. But I want to kind of be sure to be centered in the performance part, at least up front. So you mentioned already that you're the only person in your family who, kind of isn't involved in performance, that kind of thing. So for you, was that just something that was never interesting to you, or something, kind of what was your relationship to performance before starting to get into like streamed and podcast actual plays and whatnot?
It was truly just, I had incredible anxiety. I would have loved, and I've always thought, like, I'd always have the daydream, the fantasy of performing. Very specifically like comedy. I loved the idea of being like the comedic relief of a show. I remember watching Kenan and Kel on Nickelodeon. And being 100%. I loved Kel. I was like, if I could act, I would love to be like, I would love to play a Kel character. But I was just very anxious. Every time I was put in front of any kind of audience, I would always freak out. Any kind of performance I did do was usually like church plays or school plays. And I'd always take like the background character that didn't have any lines because I just couldn't bring myself to actually perform. So I don't know. I've always had the dream of doing it. And I think I just reached a point of like, I think it was kind of frustration with myself, I think. One of my sisters also had like anxiety when it came to speaking in front of people, and then very suddenly didn't. I just kind of got over it, and I was like, they're younger than me. How can I let them one up me like this?
Sibling rivalry and spite is a real valid motivator.
Yeah. So I kind of was like, okay, I'm just going to like put myself in a position where I have to get over it. And I was streaming video games at first of like, I'm going to be doing a thing, have people watching me. I have to entertain these people as I do this thing. And I figured that would be like a good source of exposure therapy. And then going into like actual play, I don't know how many people have, like outside of my friend group, have this experience, but I used to do forum role play. Like I used to write like, I guess, in quote unquote, improv stories with and collaborative stories with people.
You are definitely not the first one on this show to talk about it, for sure.
Yeah. So I ended up when I got into AP, I was already doing that on the side. It was like for fun, doing forum roleplay still. And then I go into actual play and like performed in like that first TTRPG. And I was like, this is like forum roleplay, but like immediate gratification.
Yeah.
I don't
absolutely.
need to write paragraphs after paragraphs. I can just play this person with friends, and we just immediately bounce off of each other. I don't have to wait for them to reply. They are going to immediately reply to me. I can immediately reply back. Yeah, it was really strangely gratifying. So I think that further in like made me obsessed with the performance and craft of it.
Yeah. So for at least early on, because now, I know you've done in-studio productions, I think a good number of in-studio productions, but also obviously do a metric fuckload of actual play stuff behind the scenes and on the camera. Was it simply just like, this was so exciting that I can blow past enough of my anxiety? Was the screen and camera distance helpful? Like, what was the kind of like, just tiny, that little bit of anti-anxiety window that kind of gave you just enough room to kind of like squeeze past it, if that makes sense?
I think it was after the first game, someone like actively approached me and being like, I love playing with you.
Yeah.
I think like, I love playing with you. Your character was so fun. I would love to play with you more. Because I think the thing with my anxiety, or just any, I'm sure many people can relate to this, is that no matter how well you did, you can always figure out a way to downplay what you did. Like you can always figure out like, I shouldn't have said this, I shouldn't have done that. But then having someone who has like truly no reason to compliment you, like this wasn't even a friend, this was a stranger that I played with, telling me that they enjoyed playing with me. I was like, that was cool, I guess. Maybe I can try it again, I suppose. And I did. I just kept falling more and more in love with it and finding that more and more people did enjoy playing with me. And that kind of, I guess, quietened, or at very least lessened my anxieties. Because I'm like, okay, cool, you're saying all this stuff to yourself, but person X said this and person A said this. And they have no reasons to say this other than they genuinely mean it.
Yeah, it can be pretty loud sometimes when other people say nice things.
Yeah.
So kind of aside from positive validation and affirmation, what about role-playing and kind of storytelling through tabletop role-playing games? Like, what itch does that scratch in your brain and or soul that obviously has kept you doing it for many, many years now?
Yeah, I've just always been interested in telling stories. Even as a young kid, I was writing them most of the time. But I also loved, like, I remember I would play make-believe with my friends. I haven't talked about this much, actually. I think this might be the first time I talk about it.
Yes, got the scoop.
But I remember when I was really young, I had to be like maybe 8 or 9 years old. My friends and I would play these characters. We'd basically play Nintendo characters. But for some reason, even at a young age, we were like, we can't play the exact Nintendo characters because Nintendo would sue us. We can't do it. So
it's good business sense is what that
exactly.
is. It's
at 8 years old.
It's good to have IP law cognizance no matter what age you are.
Yeah.
Protect yourself.
Exactly. So I remember we would play these characters but would change the names ever so slightly to be like, Nintendo can't do anything.
That's the greatest.
So I'd play, instead of Waluigi, I played Waluigi.
They added one W. If I add another one, then we're extra safe.
One of my friends played Luigi. Instead of Luigi, they'd play Ouija. Instead of Bowser, they'd play Browser. And I remember like getting so invested in this role playing. And then when I went to secondary school, there was like a distinct change in how the playground worked. Like in the playground in primary school, everyone was playing make-believe. People were like having fun kicking balls around, like they were playing with toys. Yeah. And then when we went from primary school to secondary school, it just wasn't a thing anymore. And I remember that shift being like really saddening.
Yeah.
Like, it's not cool to play pretend anymore.
Oh, yeah.
So finding this space where it is again was like, it was a thing my inner child deeply needed and deeply still wants, and I'm continuing to feed it that. So I think that was, thinking back to it kind of makes me emotional now.
Of course. Yeah, of course it does. I mean, I think that's one of the best parts about tabletop role-playing games is it allows you to say yes to yourself and wanting to do that, right? Of like, it gives you just enough permission, either by yourself through rules or through the group, to be like, no, hey, be goofy or make up this super dramatic, heartbreaking medical drama on a spaceship because there's rules for it. So it must be allowed. Yeah, exactly. And I absolutely understand and support that, I guess. So you've done now you've done actual plays in a gazillion different genres. Like you said, you've done a Star Trek kind of thing. You've done a lot of D&D, fantasy, sci-fi, grounded, kind of, again, kids on bikes style teen drama things. I could list every genre, and there's a chance that you have done an actual play of it. So has kind of the process of playing games and writing for games and producing games and generally being around games and stories, is there a particular kind of story that you realize that you kind of are attracted to or particularly enjoy, whether it's a genre or just kind of a vibe? Or have you transcended that now because you've played through so many that now it's like, I see all story possibilities?
That's such a... I don't know. I have like a character type that I definitely like move towards. Mm-hmm. Like if you were to tell me like you have a game in 10 minutes, build a character, I know I have a character type I can be like, this is my safe space character. Which is like the kind of, I love playing the socially inept but book smart character. Like they when you give them a textbook, when you give them a test, they're great at it. If you tell them to interact with a person or have any level of street smarts, they cannot. I love playing those kind of characters. I don't know. It's very fun. And I definitely think it's maybe a little bit of my neurodivergence of being like, I can just unmask and that's the character.
Yeah.
But when it comes to genre, I don't know. I think I have like an itch for, maybe it's because I played so many genres. I have an itch for everything at this point.
Yeah.
Like I love fantasy. Fantasy is great. I've played it so much that I kind of have an urge to play anything but fantasy.
Sure.
At this point of like high fantasy, very specifically, of like your elves and gnomes and dwarves. I love playing it, but like if I have the option, I will definitely choose other genres. I guess one genre I'd love to play, I guess, to like answer your question with an answer that's not related to your question.
Absolutely.
I'd love to play more sci-fi. I haven't played enough sci-fi, I think, or science fantasy is also like a really big aspect I'd love to like get into. I haven't played nearly enough, and I'd love to play more. So I think it's such a fun and wide, I guess, universe, for lack of a better term, they can mess around with. And I haven't done nearly enough of that. So I'd love to do more of that.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by A Foul Light Shines, a new free serial novel based on a D&D campaign. The Empire of Fire and Water has known 20 golden years of peace since the end of Agenion's War, a peace which is now in peril. When a ragtag group of friends intervene in a grotesque monster attack, they're too late to save a wounded man who leaves them with an encrypted journal and the words, "Trust no one, Tyir." Can the gang find Tyir, escape the claws of more strange monsters, and uncover the lurking threat to the Empire before it's too late? This story features themes of found family and strength in diversity, and is available for free on Campfire and Royal Road. A Foul Light Shines. Come for the fantasy. Stay for the cheese-obsessed goblin gunslinger. Dark Dice is a critically acclaimed actual play podcast brought to you by Fool and Scholar Productions. With over 20 awards in sound design, Dark Dice brings its horror-themed campaigns to life with snappy combats, terrifying monsters, and tons of original music. Each episode is only 45 minutes long and features an all-star cast of seasoned role-players and first-time players alike, including folks you might recognize, like Jeff Goldblum, Lily Pichu, and Jasper William Cartwright. Start with Season 1 and follow the adventurers on their quest to investigate a doppelganger, or jump into Season 2 and listen to a new story about a terrible, corrupting sound that infects all who hear it. Dark Dice is available for free however you listen to podcasts or at darkdice.com. So ask yourself, do you seek him? Something that certainly came up for me as I was going through your stuff, as I was, hearing you talk about some other things and talking to some other people who have played with you, who have worked with you before, a lot of people brought up about your character creation kind of process. When you're sitting down to create a character, what does that not just process look like for you, but, is there something that you try to, I guess, bring to the ideation phase, of like, oh, this is the kind of headspace I like to be in, or these are the goals that I like to accomplish, that sort of thing. What does making a character look like for you?
For me, it's like semi-impulsive, because a lot of the time the character I make is like an archetype that I'm really obsessed with at the moment. A lot of which are like from like TV shows or books, or definitely anime. Anime is like a big inspiration for me with a lot of my characters. And I'm kind of like, oh, I love this character. I love this character archetype. I wonder what they would do in this situation.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, I'll play them in this situation. I'll take them from this show and like make it obviously more my own, but have like the core basics, core elements of this character in this world that this GM is creating. That's like a big part of it. There's also the kind of idea of like, how much do I understand the system being used? Because I'm definitely kind of person, it's probably from a like more mathematical STEM background, but like I love taking a game and then making my character hyper specific.
Yes.
Of like, I have this really weird thing I want to be able to do, so I want to build my character around doing that weird thing. And if I understand the system enough to do that, that's definitely another thing that I'll try and do. For example, I played in a D&D campaign. I played so much D&D that I kind of know it like the back of my hand.
For sure.
So I'm like, okay, I want to restrict myself. I want to make a character and kind of restrict everything about them around this one core aspect of them. And I was playing an artificer in a Strixhaven campaign. So it's kind of like magical school, essentially. And I was like, this person just builds stuff. Like they're not a fighter. Why would they fight? They don't want to hurt anyone. So I want to give them spells that are only useful when building stuff and nothing else. And then it was fun playing that character in a world where we are going to be in combat.
Right,
so I'm like,
for sure.
How can I use these
still
things
D&D.
creatively?
You will be fighting
D&D.
people. That's how it works.
So I'm like, how can I use these spells that I've restricted myself to in a way that is helpful to the situation we're in, whether it's combat or not? And I ended up managing to do that. And that's when I was like, okay, cool. I want to do this more now. So I guess that's one thing. How used to the system I am is one aspect. And I guess the other is what kind of story I want to tell with that character. If I want the character to be themed around something or have a specific story that I want to explore, specific theme that I want to explore, I might build a character around that. Like I'm playing in another D&D campaign called Stormforge. And I'd watched a lot of actual plays, read a lot of stories of like, oh, the adventurer lost their partner to X, Y, and Z, and they want to go out to have revenge. And I was like, that's cool and all, but what if I play an adventurer who has all of that and they're all fine?
Yeah.
Or what if I had like a person who was a married person who has kids, a loving family, they're all still alive? Like, what kind of story can I tell with that? And I ended up telling that with Stormforge. And it ended up being a case of like, it was such a big thing that the GM, and I guess the rest of the players kind of made it so that now my family's home is the base of the party. Oh. So we we always have like scenes of like my character's parents cooking everyone dinner. We have scenes of like me and my fellow player. I play the husband to another player's character.
Oh, amazing.
So we have like scenes of us being parents to our kid character. And then I'm like, okay, cool, we have to go and be adventurous now real quick. There's a whole different story that I've never been able to explore or see. So definitely a case of like, I think the biggest one is what is a thing I want to watch, but I haven't seen much of.
Yes.
And I will fill that space is like the biggest aspect, I think.
Yeah. And something that I also enjoyed you talking a lot about is kind of the concept. And I think you, in a previous interview that I listened to, you kind of hesitated to use the phrase min-maxing. And I don't have a better one, but I get what you mean of the kind of like base evolutionary aversion to referring to yourself as a min-maxer type person. But you know, kind of as someone who enjoys being good at certain things and having a character who's like, oh yeah, this is the things that they do.
Yeah.
Is that your kind of attraction to archetypes? Is that just a kind of like, hooray, I like big numbers and succeeding is good? Is it something else? Is it all of these things and more? It
is the archetype, honestly. It's the kind of like, I find it easier, and I don't think this is the only way to do it. And I'm fully aware that people might not even like building the characters around archetypes. But I find it a lot easier for me to play a character where the mechanics back up the flavor. Mm-hmm. If I want to play a gunslinger who is as good as they say they are, it kind of sucks playing a gunslinger who is just average at shooting. Yeah. So like, so if I can, I will build a character who is like specialized to be good at what they're good at. I think what the kind of negative connotation from min-maxing comes from is never using the ones you're bad at. And that's something I don't do. So if my character isn't good at like socializing, I'm not going to shy away from socializing just because of that. I'll make it part of their character. Yeah. But I will also make it so that they're good at shooting guns or throwing punches or... Yeah,
they are good at something.
But yeah, I do definitely like hesitate not because I don't like being called a min-maxer, because I am a min-maxer. It's just that there's a extra connotation to it that comes with it that I am not a fan of, and I definitely don't identify with, especially now that I kind of become a bit more confident in my performances.
I think you brought it kind of a beautiful point to it of like, I'm still doing all the other stuff. Like I'm not only interested in doing the things that I'm good at and like showing that I'm the best in the whole screen. It is like, no, there are things that I am very good at and reasons that you keep my character around in the party, but also I'm going to talk to people and upset someone by making a pun or whatever the character vibe is. So I think that puts it very succinctly in a way that I think maybe not everyone kind of thinks about it in those terms, but I think that's wonderful. I wanted to just a little bit before going into some of the projects and stuff that you worked on specifically, I wanted to kind of soft launch into the project discussion by bringing back a little bit to kind of the nerves and anxiety bit of things.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, being you as being a big Doctor Who nerd, what was it like getting to work on the Doctor Who thing? You know, kind of what, like you've been on a lot of big shows, either that you have kind of like helped create or on big channels or involved in big projects as a writer or performer. Do you get psyched out when that happens, you know, and how do you manage that, I guess?
I get so unbelievably nervous. I still do. I'm able to like, it's not as much. I'm able to control it a lot more, but definitely at the beginning stages of like my quote unquote TTRPG career, especially with like some of the bigger shows, it was very nerve wracking. And honestly, beforehand, I didn't have like a tried and true method of getting over it. I was just like, I can't back out now. Yeah, so I have to do this.
The red light went on. We're live. I guess I'm fine with this.
But after a while, I kind of noticed that one, especially with the way I build my characters, consuming media that inspires my characters helped a lot. Because then I could be like, okay, I understand this character I'm playing.
Yeah.
And truly, if I need to, I will just in my brain make up scenarios and be like, okay, if this happens, I'll say this, and then store that away in my brain. Most of my anxiety comes from the fact that I don't have much improvisation like background. So if I have like this scene is almost certainly likely to happen, let's practice what I'll say in this scene.
Yeah, totally.
And think about it. And then I at least have like some kind of like handhold, some footholds in this project that I know I can semi-hit at the very least. Music also helped a lot, whether it's just music that to soothe me and calm me, or music that I felt like kind of associated with the character I was going to play was a big help. Just mostly consuming media, I guess, was like the biggest help for me. Whenever I'm feeling a little bit nervous about a show, I could consume some media related to it, or I just find soothing. That would help a lot.
That's really interesting. I think that's super relatable and makes a whole lot of sense. just to kind of bring like a foundation, it sounds like, to kind of how you're coming at it. But I do need to specifically ask, what was it like when you got the call about the doc? Like, obviously that was the joke jumping on answer to this like deeper question, but like, I know you are a big Doctor Who fan just from social media.
Yeah.
My understanding is that you post a good amount about it and have to physically restrain yourself from posting even more about it on social media.
Yeah.
But what a incredible thing that you got to do to be able to work on a project like that. So what was that experience like, getting to work on a project that you love?
So that actually came about very interestingly because like I mentioned, one of the actual plays that inspired me and got me into watching actual plays was Eric's TTRPG on Geek and Sundry. And they were playing the Doctor Who TTRPG. And I loved it. I didn't know there was a system for it. I was obsessed with it. And then when I got into producing actual plays myself, I remembered that TTRPG was a thing. And I was like, I would love to be a part of that. I would love to play in a TTRPG. And I'd love to see more actual plays using this TTRPG. So I remember I was like, I want to do it myself. No one's invited me to one, so I'll produce one myself.
And isn't that how 90% of all actual play tabletop stuff happens? Is like, well, no one's invited me to do it, so I guess if I want it to happen, I got to do it myself.
Yep. So I ended up working pretty hard to like get a cast together. I GM, but not much. I actually didn't GM in this. Super Dylan GM'd it. But I was like, this is after I learned like actual plays, you could be paid for them. So I was like, I'm going to look for sponsors to sponsor this show so we can pay everyone, get art, everything, all of that stuff. And I immediately reached out to Keyboard 7, who are the publishers of Doctor Who TTRPG. And they were really, really cool they were so excited to have like someone this interested in producing an actual play. We talked a bunch, and unfortunately they couldn't sponsor us financially because the BBC is really weird about the Doctor Who IP. There's a lot of IP law and stuff like that. So, and because Keyboard 7 is like the official publisher of Doctor Who, they have like a working relationship with the BBC.
Sure. So
they were like, we can't give you money for it because it's like a really weird IP space about it. But we can give you like the books and stuff to just do it. And then while we were talking, they were just like, by the way, we saw that you write. Would you want to write? At some point, I was like, yeah, I'd love to write something at some point. So they were like, okay, cool. Which Doctor, if you had to choose, which Doctor would you want to write about? And I was like, oh, I'm stuck between Matt Smith and David Tennant, but I think I have to go with Matt Smith. I really love Matt Smith. I love my Raggedy Man. And they're like, okay, cool. We'll keep that in mind. So we produced a show. It was great. It was called Doctor Who, the Many Hearts Project. It was a lot of fun. We had a running joke of like, it was the Doctor and I played the Doctor. Everyone's really cool about it. They said, let me play the Doctor. And all of the other players were like actual like PhD doctors. So the joke was that I was the Doctor and they were all actual doctors.
Yes, amazing.
We had like the running gag of like, if someone said the Doctor, everyone would turn around because someone's named the Doctor and everyone else are actual doctors. It was a lot of fun. But after that, they reached out to me. Keyboard 7 reached out to me to be like, hey, we have this thing that we need some stories and adventures for. And you mentioned that you would really love to write for Doctor Who adventures. So like, here you go, write something. It was so exciting. I was, especially for it to be for the 60th anniversary as well, I was fully thought it was going to be like for just a random book.
Sure. Yeah.
But it being like a thing to celebrate 60 years of one of my favorite series meant a lot.
Sure.
I don't think I've dedicated so much time and thought to anything like I did to that adventure.
I can't imagine.
But yeah, it was mind-blowing. Truly, I would love to write for it again because I think Doctor Who is one of my favorite stories in general, and the way they write hopeful sci-fi. And honestly, it definitely bleeds into science fantasy as well, especially with the most recent season. I've always been a fan of the hopefulness of it, even with the dire straits and the heartache and the danger. There's always a sense of hopefulness attached to it that I really, really enjoy. So again, to like add my spin to it and have it be like an official thing. It might not be canon in the like TV series, but it's like canon within the TTRPG series.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really cool.
That's I can't imagine how amazing of an experience that must have been.
Yeah.
That kind of leads to the production side of things. So was that the first time? Because now Again, for listeners who may or may not know, Drak, you've produced a good number of shows, including shows that you were not even on screen for, most notably or most recently Beyond the Brook. And so was that an early or the first time where you're really in like a producer behind the scenes role, or like what was your evolution, I guess, to go from, oh, cool, people keep inviting me to their tables to, oh, cool, I'm organizing things. I'm maybe bringing in sponsors, or at least I'm making sure that we have a table of people, choosing systems, all that good stuff, and kind of being the glue of a table, even if you're not on screen. What did that look like?
It was actually like, I hadn't had like a name attached to it, but I'd been doing it like almost from the get-go with French Roll Dice.
Mm-hmm.
French Roll Dice ended up being a thing we made, a TTRPG channel we put together, because the one that we were with previously was honestly just kind of awful. All of the isms you can think of, it was happening. Mm-hmm. Everyone in that channel, I wasn't even part of the channel. I was like a guest. So I didn't experience it directly. But a lot of people who are part of that channel kind of peeled away and was like, let's do our own thing. And it was Jen who actually invited me to play with them more after Medical Bay 3. But Jen was like, hey, do you want to like be a part of the creation of this channel? And I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll do it. And we kind of just fell into roles. We didn't even really assign it. We just kind of like, I'm kind of good at organizing, so I'll help organize shows. So I ended up doing a lot of the charity stream organizing of like, I'd reach out to people to be like, hey, do you want to play in our game for charity? And then I'd organize session zeros. I'd do the tech production behind the scenes. I'd be the person people reach out to if they have like problems that they don't feel comfortable with reaching out to the GMs or the players about directly. So it just kind of happened. And I was doing it without like, honestly, any credit for a long time, because I just thought it was like a normal thing. I didn't think it was a thing that I needed a title.
Yeah, you're a part of a thing.
Yeah,
and you're working on it, and then out comes the thing, and there you go. And I worked on it.
Yeah, but then I started realizing that it was kind of a thing that was like a lot of people would love to have.
Yeah,
of like, because most of the time that role falls on the GM. So the GM is doing the storytelling, obviously, putting together the campaign, but also doing like the wrangling of cats, of getting everyone to a session zero, maybe reaching out to artists. Is very rarely dedicated to specific people. It's often put on one person's shoulders. So after I kind of noticed that, I kind of took it a lot more seriously. This isn't just like a passion project. This is a thing that's like making these stories a lot easier to make. Mm-hmm. It's taken like the weight off a lot of shoulders to do this. So I just kept doing that for French Roll Dice for like, I think it's probably 2 years. I can't quite remember. But then when I kind of made it like this is who I am. This is my role. You can hire me to do this. Was after I left French Roll Dice. I ended up leaving French Roll Dice just because I was just juggling too many things. I was doing my own shows, doing shows with French Roll Dice. I was performing. Like I just couldn't handle juggling all of that because it made everything lower quality that I was doing. So I wanted to at least have a more focused thing that I can put all my energy into. So I ended up leaving French Roll Dice, and then was like, hire me to do this for you. I can, and if not hire me, I will just do it myself and hopefully get paid for it with sponsorships.
I will hire myself to do this.
Exactly. But yeah, it was after I left French Roll Dice where the shift kind of went from just doing it as a passion project to this is like a thing that I identify as. I am a producer.
Yeah. Before we kind of go any further, what for you, and again, knowing that this goes differently for different people, different groups, different tables, whatever's, kind of job to job too, I'd imagine. But what does, when someone says, Drak, you will be producing this show, what does that usually consist of, just in terms of the things that you like to bring to a show, kind of, again, knowing it's flexible and blah, blah, blah.
I think the biggest thing, other than obviously like the cat wrangler of organizing session zeros, if they don't have a cast already, often I would help pick the cast or at least give my opinion. Because I've been lucky enough to play in so many games that I've played with so many people. Yeah. So I can be like, okay, these people would be a good match. They'd bounce off of each other really well. I've actually been, I think it was Dylan actually was maybe one of the first people to hire me specifically to find cast members because they realized how good I have. Like feels weird to say, but I do have a knack for figuring out good combinations of players that would work well with each other. So definitely like, I guess a casting manager is kind of part of it. I'd help find a cast. I'd help find sponsors is the biggest thing. I know obviously from experience, but also just from people telling me finding sponsors is so time consuming.
Oh yeah.
So I want to be able to do that and help take that off people's plates. Tech production sometimes on the table if that's a thing that they need or want. So I'll be the one to be like recording things while everyone plays. I will do anything like artist, or like if you're reaching out, if you want to do anything like commission art for character art, I'll be handling the communication with the artists. So I guess a little bit of like art design comes into it as well. Honestly, every behind the scene thing I will happily handle. I kind of like write contracts if you want to. We need a contract for sponsors, which is everyone who's listening highly recommend. In fact, I think you should make it mandatory to have a contract written out. It doesn't have to be like an official lawyerese kind of thing, but having something on paper is a big help. I do that a lot. But yeah, it's a lot of the paperwork. A lot of the paperwork and organizing I handle.
I think, at least for me, there are always a few kind of specific hurdles of, and just to talk about kind of the fundraising financial part of this, and then circling back to all the other bits. There's always a couple kind of big hurdles, certainly time, energy, even knowing, kind of who might be interested. Yeah. But also there's like the social like rejection part of it, especially, when you are a part of the cast and part of the creative team or whatever, of like, this is my beautiful child. They're perfect and wonderful. But what if someone says no? And how do I take that? And so for you, is that something that just kind of came naturally for you, just to be able to like divorce yourself a little bit from it? Or are you someone who, like me, is like hyperventilating and like having to force myself to hit send, holding onto my wrist and pushing the button down to reach out to anyone to do anything?
I'm not immune to it, but I think I have better control over it than I used to, of like rejection. It was definitely kind of a case of like, oh, I got an email. I need to make sure I'm mentally prepared to open it before I do open it. Yeah. That's definitely still the case. But I think now when it comes to like rejection or like sponsorships of this show, I don't equate it to them not thinking the project is worth it, especially depending on who I'm reaching out to. But a lot of the time it's just, they're not thinking about how good this show is. They're thinking about their bottom line a lot of the time. And I shouldn't take that personally. Yeah. Like the chances are they might have not even read the email. They just saw that you wanted money and they're like, sorry, we can't give you money. Yeah. And like that, divorcing it, not me divorcing my feelings of the actual play, but divorcing any assumptions that they have some kind of feelings towards the actual play is what helped me. I assume that they don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So when they say no, they're not saying no to my project. They're saying no to what they think my project is, or or a thing that they didn't even bother to know about. And that helps me kind of move on from one rejection to, because you do get a lot of rejections. I think for higher education, I helped Vanna reach out to sponsors. As a collective, reached out to maybe 150 companies and maybe got back 10 replies. And of those 10 replies, maybe 5 or 6 of them were, yes, we'll give you money.
I think that's super useful transparency. Like, the space is so indie that no one has any concept of that sort of scope whatsoever.
Yeah, like be prepared to reach out to hundreds. Like truly, we only stopped at 150 because we're all fine. We're like, we will play it even if we don't get money. So we can. It's fine.
That's enough. We've done our due diligence.
But yeah, truly be prepared for rejection. And at least for me, what helped with handling rejection was divorcing any assumption that they thought negatively of my actual play from it. As far as I'm concerned, they don't even know what an actual play is. And they're just saying no because they don't have the money for it. And that helps a huge amount.
Definitely. Well, so kind of part of that process that I think also might be valuable for me too, but for anyone is kind of the pitch process. And I think this is something that might be useful for people, certainly who are looking to get sponsorships, looking to forge connections, but also just people who are trying to distill what their show or product or project is to make people want to give money or even listen or consume it in any way. So that's a very specific skill. And is not a STEM skill, is not a performance skill, is not any of the other one, not just a steeling yourself against rejection skill. How did you learn how to do that? And what does that look like for you? And what kind of guiding lines do you try to always take with you when you're putting those sorts of things together?
So it's a bit of being taught it and winging it.
Yeah.
So higher education was like I said, a Strixhaven campaign over on Vana channel, VANA, good friend of mine. And they've been in the TTRPG space for a very long time. They were a part of Geek and Sundry in their peak. They did a lot of actual plays on that channel, and they've done a lot of actual plays since then. And they were the one that's producing higher education, the TTRPG, the actual play, sorry. And they were the one that did majority of the outreach for... Oh, sorry. No, it wasn't higher education. Higher education is a show they did, but before higher education, there's a show called Until Dusk Till Dark. And it was another D&D campaign, but it was using, I think it was the Icewind Dale adventure module. And Vanna did all of the reach out for sponsors, like everything. And I remember watching Vanna do this, and I was like, I really want to be able to do this. Can you teach me? So Vanna gave me the slides to the pitch deck, and I kind of went through it, kind of learned the basics of what kind of template I should follow. And I kind of honestly just used that. And then as time went on, kind of distilled it more and more. And through experience, learned different ways to pitch something. Because I think the biggest thing I learned is while slideshows are really helpful, some people don't have the time to go through 10, 15 slides. So I ended up learning how to not just have those, but also have a one-pager, just in case I'm reaching out to a company that I know is way too big and too busy to be looking through the slideshow, some guy in the UK, or just so that it's a one-pager so that we can have a very quick back and forth. Because I very quickly learned that, especially after the peak of the pandemic. To be honest, we're still very much in the peak of the pandemic. But after one of the peaks,
continue getting vaccinated, et cetera, et cetera.
Please keep masking, get vaccinated.
Yep.
But after one of the many peaks of the pandemic, and we're still seeing it now, but there's a lot of reshuffling happening in businesses.
Yeah.
People, whole departments are being fired, which is very unfortunate. But if you're also trying to find funding within this landscape, you kind of have to make it quick before there's another reshuffle. Because once that happens, they will lose your email thread. Yeah. Your contact might even be one of the people that leaves the company. So I end up very quickly finding out that I want to distill everything that this person would need into one email, into one page. And a good way to do that is have touchstones for what your AP is about.
Yes.
Instead of being this is going to be an emotional drama of this, this, and this, you can be this is going to be an emotional drama inspired by, for example, Beyond the Brick was inspired by Over the Garden Wall.
Yes.
Infinity Train, given these touchstones and making sure that they're touchstones that a wide variety of people would recognize as well is really helpful. Showing that you have a very concrete idea of what this is going to be is very helpful as well. So I never reach out to anyone unless I have a cast. I know who are interested, they're going to know who's going to play. Sometimes even go down to the point of I know when I'm going to record and when I'm going to air it.
Sure.
Because even those can help people you reach out to. Because if you're going to air it in December, maybe they have a game that's happening in December that they want you to advertise in your show.
Yeah, right.
So being very upfront and playing everything out down to the most minute details, very helpful, I found. God, what else? Hyperlink everything. Do not leave them to go on a wild goose chase themselves. Hyperlink every single thing that you want them to know about and find. Even if it's just hey, I'm Drak and I've been in this, and this thing. Because it's always nice to tell them what you've done. To
definitely.
Okay, they know what they're doing. They have experience in this. If you do that, hyperlink to every single one of those projects you're going to be mentioning.
Make it easy is what you're meaning.
Exactly.
remove all obstacles as much as humanly possible is spoon feed.
Pretend that they do not know how to use Google. Give them everything. Honestly, I think that might be the biggest thing. Give them truly everything in one email, because especially when if you reach out to bigger companies, they won't have time to have a back and forth email thread with you.
Definitely. Make
sure they have no questions to ask you. If they do have questions to ask you after that, make sure you answer it as thoroughly as possible so they don't have any other questions after that. God, I think I rambled. I don't even know if I was answering.
No. Not at all. You were listing off crucial bits of information. That is not a ramble, even a little bit. I have so many spin-off questions that I want to try and ask, but I think for me, the most important one or most interesting one right now is this is, you said, oh, you watched this happen in front of you and you said, oh, that's something I want to do and something I'm interested in. What about this is interesting to you? Again, especially some of the times you're not performing it. It's not your story. None of these are your characters. There's more distance between you, at least at face value, you and the show than what most actual plays would look like, right? Where, like you said, it's the GM doing everything or it's the cast doing all of the jobs. So what attracted you this direction and what has made it something, again, that you're still doing and continuing to kind of get more and more enmeshed in?
I wish I could give like a deeply poetic answer, but I think there's definitely like something a little bit narcissistic about it. I think like most performances, there's some level of narcissism. And I think for me, mine extends to the fact of like, I do enjoy like actively creating these stories, being a player and being part of these stories, but I'm still kind of creating these stories as a producer. I'm making them possible. Beyond the Brook, honestly, was just like an idea that I was like, I think I was watching Over the Garden Wall and I was like, damn, it'd be cool if we did this. And I just tweeted about it. And I was like, I had no intention of actually doing it, honestly. And then I was reached out to by several people who was like, I would love for this to be a thing. And there's a little voice inside of me being like, you could be the one to give it to them. You could do it. You can make this possible. I guess the poetic answer is, as a producer, I'm still telling the story, even though I'm not on camera. And the kind of more narcissistic part of it is kind of like, I get to be the person who brought this to you. I'm the reason for this. Or at the very least, one of the reasons. Yeah, and I'm still kind of obsessed with that. And there's also a case of like, most of the things that I produce are things that I would want to watch as well.
Yes.
So it's kind of a case of like, even if I'm not playing in it, all I care about as a performer, as a producer, is filling that gap that I've noticed. And whether I'm on camera for it or off camera for it, as long as that goal is achieved, that is kind of like fulfilling for me.
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to putting a table together, you're pulling from some people that you've played with, some people you've gotten vibes from, and I'm sure a mix of a great many things.
Yeah.
Is there a process that you have for kind of picking out people, or is it just like some sixth sense tells you, yes, I'll put in a dash of this person and this player, and I'll give it a big stir with this GM, and then it just kind of all kind of comes together?
Yeah, sort of. Like one part is that I'm almost always constantly in that process, because sometimes, a lot of the time I truly, like, especially with Beyond the Brook is a very good example. With Beyond the Brook, even before I had Beyond the Brook in mind, I'd seen Maddie and Laurel. They're video game streamers on Twitch. Incredible people. Highly recommend checking out their streams. But they primarily do video games. And I remember Laurel tweeting a while ago, probably like a year ago at this point, of like having fun at a D&D game. And I remember clocking that, being like, oh, you play D&D. Interesting. I want to store that away in my head and use that for later. A couple of months after that, I remember seeing Maddie and Laurel interacting together, and I could very quickly tell that they're very good friends. I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to store that away in my brain. And then truly, like maybe a couple of months before I fully got into the process of making Beyond the Brook, I saw that Maddie and Laurel were actually both theatre kids and were actively in a theatre show together. So I was like, oh, not only are they friends, they have theatre experience, and they're actively playing in a show together. I have to do something with these two. So I was like, that process of that. But then I also have, so those are usually like the vibes. That's definitely like what you mentioned before. I have like I see their vibe and I'm like, that'd be cool to see in a game.
Yes.
But I do have like more concrete categories I put people in my brain for people I have played with. One that I have like a name for that I've actively like mentioned a lot and I always have is someone I refer to as the glue, of someone who I know is like really good at bringing a group of not just characters but players together, of who's very good at making people comfortable with each other. So I think that's the biggest thing, especially when a lot of APs are essentially strangers being brought together.
Yeah, especially in this, like it is either like friends who have known each other for a long time doing the classic throwing a mic in the middle of the table, or some variation thereof, or it is like, well, hey, it's so good to meet you for the first time. I guess we're telling emotionally vulnerable stories together here in about 3 weeks.
Yeah. So I have like several people in my brain that after playing with them, I felt like, oh, this person's really good at making people feel comfortable. And that's one person I will always add to the table. So I think no matter what, as long as the players are comfortable, you're going to tell an incredible story. For example, Beyond the Brick, Stella was that for me. Stella Luna is like, Stella Luna is also my best friend. But even just on a professional level, when I play with them, I very, very quickly noticed how good they are at making nervous people feel much more comfortable and relaxed at the table. And I definitely wanted that for Laura and Maddie, because even though Laura has D&D experience, and even though they both have theater experience, like performing TTRPGs is still like a different thing. Definitely. So I wanted them to feel comfortable. So I always have in mind the glue of the group, who's going to make everyone feel safe and comfortable. And then after that is honestly just kind of vibe mixes. Like this person I know is like very good at storytelling, but taking big swings. So I'm going to throw them in. And I know they'll be able to like, they'll throw big swings, but this person will temper them enough that it won't be story hindering big swings. I've just kind of, I guess, gotten good at reading people's vibes after seeing them play or seeing how they interact with other people. And I've gotten good at mixing and matching them. Honestly, probably from trial and error. I think I probably just kind of honed it through trial and error with French Roll Dice, because I did that like constantly, frequently, over and over again with them, that I've kind of like brought it down to a subconscious science that sometimes I don't even realize I'm doing.
You've got an instinct now, at least. Yeah, very cool. So do you, and maybe this is a simple like, oh, that's not a part of the thing that I do, answer, which is great, and I'll just edit it out. But once you've picked the people, you picked the system, kind of everything is assembled. You started scheduling your session zeros. All the machinations are moving. Yeah. Something I'm always really interested about, especially in groups where there is, kind of strangers coming together, or rotating casts, or just kind of new one-off projects or short-term projects, is getting everyone kind of on the same page, especially if they're people who haven't played together, or in some cases have never played, where they might have different ideas of what this genre looks like, or what this story might be, or this character might be, whatever. Is that something that you are usually kind of like involved or help the GM with? Or is that something where you're like, hey, I've brought these people together and now they can kind of go off and figure out what this game is? Yeah. So I'm still involved. I'm definitely involved. I usually communicate with the GM as well, very heavily. And we'll usually write a doc of what this game is, some themes, some inspirations. Love that. Honestly, very much like the pitch that we send to sponsors. We show this very similar, these bullet points, these themes to the players, so they know what they're getting into. Because I usually give it to them before they even said yes to this, so they can be know exactly what they're getting into. Yeah. But then kind of again give them a refresh of it once they're in it. But another thing that I actually experienced as a player, and then I was like, I'm going to take this away and use it in my own productions, is having one, or if you can, several session 0.5s is what I've called it. Non-canon roleplay sessions of this will never see the light of day, but play these characters and see how they feel. And then if you don't like it, change up the character. Yes, for sure. Because there's been a countless number of times as a player of I have an idea for a character and then I play it and it does not survive contact. The moment I start playing, I'm like, okay, this dynamic is very different to what I thought it was going to be. There's no room for this kind of archetype, this kind of character. I'm going to
flip the switch and fill the gap that's necessary in this moment, which is fine. I think that's great, but it makes it very easy for there to be a chance of that you don't enjoy the character you've ended up being kind of not pigeonholed, but like ended up finding yourself in.
Right. Once you're live, like once things are public, once things are moving forward, it gets a little kind of hard, a little sticky at least.
Yeah. So with Beyond the Brick, for example, we did a session 0.5 where we just roleplayed. The wonderful Edward Spence, who was a GM, made like a very short, basic adventure, and everyone just played in it, figured out the character.
Yep, we did that
and
too.
I actually remember it's really helpful. Honestly, with Beyond the Brick, it was so helpful because one of the people who really took advantage of it was Stella, because Stella had an idea for their character, and when they played it, they were like, "Oh, the dynamic we have as a group, this character doesn't fit." So like halfway through, they were like, "Hey, I don't like how my character is being played, so I'm going to change it up after this break." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Cool. And after the change, the way it fit so cohesively was incredible. And it would have been possible. Like, you can do it live, but when it is live, you're performing and you don't want to do like drastic changes all of a sudden.
Yep.
Getting a chance to do that so freely without the anxiety and the eyes on them, I think made the series that came out of it infinitely better. Mm-hmm. So having session 0.5s and a document that bullet points everything that they should expect, I think was a big help. And like I mentioned, like Maddie had no experience with TTRPGs. So Maddie being able to have like a chance to feel it out without it being like, this will be shown to everyone.
Yeah. Yes.
Was really helpful for them. Mm-hmm. And I think they ended up shining. And I've become like, and I think they kind of hooked on TTRPGs after that well, which is...
Got him in.
Could have been in several TTRPGs since then. But yeah, I think if you can afford it, because I think it's definitely a thing. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough to pay people for it, but I still think a dress rehearsal, it's essentially a dress rehearsal.
Right.
Have a dress rehearsal.
Yep.
If you can afford it, money or time-wise, I highly recommend it.
Yep. We did it too. And we were very much like, we did several. And from the get-go, we've screamed at everyone. It's like, no. It's like really nice to practice, really to get the vibes. It doesn't always happen, but it's a nice, good thing to do when you can, for sure.
Yeah. I also recommend just hanging out.
Yes.
We had like one session 0 of like obviously going through the session 0 stuff, but then afterwards just hung out for like an hour or just talking.
Very cool.
Because then at the very least, you go from strangers to maybe hopefully acquaintances. And it's a lot easier to roleplay with an acquaintance than a stranger.
Yes, absolutely. I want to make sure we touch at least a little bit on the final pillar of Drac TTRPG-ness in adventure writing. We've touched on it a little bit. Again, obviously you worked on Doctor Who. You've worked on Fat Magic. You've worked on Deimos Academy, a bunch of other places, actually.
Yeah.
But I was curious, not just how you got involved with it, especially kind of coming from just the performing side of things, but how that differs in terms of self-expression for you, if it does, and like why that part of TTRPGs is also interesting to you on top of producing, on top of performing, on top of all these other things that you're already doing. Because it's a different skill. It's a very different experience.
I guess I'll start with how it started. I will be honest, it kind of started with a tweet. I just really wanted to write because I'd seen a lot of my friends writing adventures. And I was like, hey, if anyone wants like a writer, I don't have any professional experience, but I have been writing for like just for my personal benefit and for fun for a while. So if you want to hire me, please do. And I got hired as a stretch goal writer for a game called End Times. It was by Vajra Enterprise, I think. Vajra Entertainment or Vajra Enterprise. I can't remember which one. And it was basically a TTRPG system, or rather TTRPG game, because they made it for Powered by the Apocalypse and their own system as well.
Cool.
But it was basically about essentially time travel, but more like consciousness traveling between times in like points in time, where and only a select people had these abilities, and you had to write, and I had to write an adventure about one of these. And I really loved it. It kind of touched on time travel, which I loved because of just Doctor Who and just in general loving the sci-fi aspect of time travel, but also kind of scratched that itch that was being scratched, but not in like the kind of written way that forum roleplay did for me. Like, even though I obviously love the immediate gratification from roleplay, there's still something nice about sitting down and writing out an adventure of step-by-step experiences and stories and stuff like that people can interact with. So I kind of got into that through Vajra, and then I had that under my belt. So then I was like, hey, now I have a thing. Behold, anyone else wants to hire me for stuff? And it was Banana-chan, who actually was my link. Banana-chan, I think Banana-chan knew of me for a while, but acknowledged me as a friend after a game I had produced for them on French Roll Dice. We were raising money for Stop AAP I Hate. And it all blossomed from the unfortunate trend of Scarlett Johansson playing Asian characters.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Banana-chan jokingly was like, oh God, I'd love to play in a TTRPG where we played Scarlett Johansson. And I was like, I love the idea. Let's do it.
I can assist you with that one.
Yeah. So I ended up making a charity game called Everybody's Scarjo. And it was an all Asian cast.
I feel like I remember that, but the name is new. Anyway, not important.
Yeah.
Please carry on.
It was using a system called Everybody's John. And I was like, this is a perfect system to have everyone just be Scarjo. So everyone played different aspects of Scarjo, and it's an all Asian cast. It was very, very fun, very, very funny. But after that, I guess after the vibe check from that, Banana-chan was like, okay, cool, I do like you. I'll recommend you some writer friends I have, as well as hire me on for some of their own stories. So that's how I ended up on Deimos Academy. Banana-chan reached out to me to be like, hey, do you wanna write for Deimos Academy? And I was very happy to do that. And then I just got obsessed with it. I think it reignited a love of writing I had. So I kind of fell out of it because of school.
Sure.
I was writing for education and academic purposes. And I was like, so sitting down to write for fun was just reminded me of school. So I don't want to do this anymore. So being able to write again, these fun, whimsical adventures kind of reignited that for me. And I've been desperately clinging on to that fire ever since. And yeah, even though it's very different media and avenues, it kind of feels the same. It does the same thing for me that producing actual plays does for me, of me seeing a missing thing, a gap.
Yeah.
In maybe there's a type of story that I'd love to see but haven't seen before. I see that there's missing, so I take the opportunity to write it myself. I think that's the linking thing between being a producer and being a writer for me, of seeing that empty space that I think I would love to fill. And I'd love to, I as a viewer, I as a reader, I as a player would love to play in this world. I don't see it, so I'm going to write it.
Yes, absolutely. Is there anything, now that you've worked on a good number of of professional projects, is there anything that you've kind of learned and picked up to not just kind of put yourself out there, which I kind of want to talk about as we start to wind down, but more specifically of what people are looking for, or how to find out what people are looking for? Because it's one thing to write an adventure for yourself or for your own game, or to just put out on Itch or on Ko-fi or whatever. But it's it's a very different thing to be something that someone is taking and putting in their book, in their product, in their world, etc. So how have you have you had to learn anything to streamline and improve that process?
I've had to learn how to manage my executive dysfunction.
I mean, amen to that on all projects.
I'm sure many people can relate to this, but I definitely was and definitely still am the kind of person who'd be like, the deadline's in 3 weeks, I'll get started later. And then it's the deadline's in 2 weeks, I'll get started later. Until it's the day prior, I'm like, okay, I need to knock this out. And even though that it would work, it was a very bad habit, especially when working with professionally, where, like you said, they've taken your adventure, taking you as a creator, as a writer, and putting it into their work. They often want very frequent updates.
Sure.
And if you haven't done anything until the last day, you can't give frequent updates. And that is very nerve-wracking for them. Very understandably nerve-wracking for them. So I learned that even though it works for me to work on the last day, I don't want to be stressing the person who hired me out.
Yeah.
To be like, I'll have it done the day prior. So I've learned to like manage my executive dysfunction, manage my knack for procrastination, and teach myself that writing a little is better than writing nothing.
Sure.
Was a very big thing.
Love that.
So I'd often sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words. And then when I don't write 1,000 words, I feel awful. So even if you can't bring yourself to write 1,000 words, if you can bring yourself to write 10, that's game changing.
Yes.
That's 10 less words.
Yep.
When it came to putting myself out there, it takes some getting used to. Because like I said, like the very beginnings of all of this truly was, I had stage fright and I was tired of having stage fright.
Yeah, right.
So like that fire is still kind of burning in me of like, I want to do all these things and maybe I don't know how to do it. So I'm just going to ask. Like, I will just ask how to do it. You're not expected to know all of these things. And I think it's very easy to feel like you should, because unfortunately in the TTRPG space, and I imagine in many spaces, but most of my experiences in the TTRPG space, everyone's very tight-lipped about how things work. I couldn't Google how to do all of the stuff I've learned.
Yeah.
I had to go out and ask people that aren't like documents, that aren't like YouTube series explaining how all of this stuff works. So it makes it very easy for people to think that if you don't know how to do it, you just can't do it.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So I think realizing that not only is it okay not to know how to do things, but it's also okay just to ask was a big thing for me. Because like, I'm sure there is. Honestly, to this day, I don't know if there is a place where people are just going to find writers. I'm just like, hey, I write, hit me up.
Yeah.
And then that's how I've gotten a lot of my gigs, which I've been very lucky about. So when it comes to putting yourself out there, just remember that it's okay to not know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just do it. And you'll hopefully find people who are willing to not only give you a chance, but maybe teach you as well. That's what I've been very lucky with as well. I have a lot of teachers, people who like have more experience than I've had and are willing to guide me through it. So don't be afraid of looking foolish, because everyone starts there at some point, and just ask for what you want to know or what you want to do. If an opportunity arises, no matter how ill-prepared you feel like you are, say yes. Is another thing. Obviously make it upfront that maybe you don't have that much experience, because you don't want to spring that on people when it's too late. But be willing to be like, I don't know I don't have the experience here, but I'm willing to learn and gain it. Has been like the thing that kind of encouraged me to get over the fear of putting myself out there.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful perspective. There are so many gazillion things that I still want to talk about, but you know, we are but humans and can only create content for so long, because life continues and brains need sustenance and rest. So I think the last question I want to ask is about giving your brain sustenance and rest. You are in some way involved in a ton of shows. It seems to me like multiple at a time, not infrequently, while also, again, having like a real life to balance and like a human existence to care for and other responsibilities and rent and whatever. And so I was just kind of curious, especially because you are a producer who is someone who is scheduling stuff and checking in and kind of having that almost bird's eye view of people putting themselves into a project. Yeah. How do you manage that for yourself? You know, is that something you're good at? Is that something that you've been learning how to do, hopefully fingers crossed? Or just what's your perspective on how you care for yourself to make sure that you know, as you said already, that you can bring yourself to whatever you're working on. You can do a good job on all the things you're working on instead of trying to do a little bit all over the place. Yeah.
I'm still learning. And I was definitely like in a much worse place. Like when I gave the example of leaving French roll dice, it's because I'd spread myself so thin that it was getting bad. Not like physically or mentally or anything like that, but well, probably mentally. Definitely wouldn't want to do that for much longer, because it would have been a mental tiring there. But it was affecting the performances of everything. It was affecting the shows I produced, the shows I performed in, the adventures I was writing. because I just couldn't dedicate enough time and effort into it. So learning what the absolute most you can do is, and then giving yourself room even below that.
Yes.
Because you never know what will happen that will knock your max down. I remember when, as I mentioned it, content warning for the mention of death, a death of a celebrity, but I remember when Chadwick Boseman died. I think for a lot of the Black community, a lot of the community in general, but especially the Black community, it hit very, very hard. And I remember just before then, I was fine. I was like doing all of these things and I was within my max. It was probably like right at my max. And then when that happened, very, very quickly, my max spoons were depleted.
Yes,
and
right.
all of a sudden, these things
all gone.
that I was doing.
No spoons left. Negative spoons. I owe people spoons.
Yeah. So then very suddenly, these things I was doing very comfortably within my grasp was way out of hand. I couldn't handle it anymore. So I very quickly learned that I needed to not only work within my abilities, but also give myself some wiggle room within that as well. I'd also recommend being okay saying no. That's a thing was very hard for me to do, especially when you're just starting off in a space. You feel very much pressure to say yes to everything because you never know when the next opportunity comes. You always have that like voice in the back of your head saying, this might be the last chance. They might forget you after this. You have to do something. You have to do something.
And you have to do it well, don't forget, and be perfect and great and make that amazing first impression so that you don't get blacklisted for all eternity, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah. Couldn't be me. That's just like a hypothetical, like not something that I've ever thought of or experienced personally. No.
Yeah. So you have to be able to say no, because again, if you say yes to too many things, sure, you'll be in all of these things, but you'll be subpar in all of these things. It's better to have quality over quantity. If you have a few great things rather than a ton of okay things,
yes,
more people are going to remember the great things than the one okay thing. So be okay to say no and find time to just do stuff for yourself, like off camera, just hang out.
Yeah.
I am still working on that. To this day, I don't think I have a off camera game. I don't have an off camera actual campaign I'm doing. Everything's actual plays.
Yep.
Which is,
it is what it is.
It's a thing I'm working on. It is what it is. I'm working on that. But I do have like hobbies that I do off stream, off camera without an audience that I find very soothing and calming. I have friends that I can hang out with that even though they might be performers, whether or not performers or not, we're doing things that are just for us and not for content that people are going to consume afterwards, which is really helpful. And then like more specific to me, I just really love watching anime and that's really helpful. That's like very healing for me.
Yeah,
just like staying down, watching either really intense, intriguing anime or just like brain off anime of people like buff superheroes punching each other. Like that's great for me.
Mm-hmm.
Might not be for everyone, but something that doesn't need your brain to be on all the time has been really helpful for me and highly recommend if you haven't tried it yourself.
Drac, I could just keep blabbing, keep asking. I didn't talk about your recent appearance on friend of the show, Planet Arcana, Fool's Errand. Barely talked about all these other things. But unfortunately, as good of a time as we've had, the clock has run out.
Yeah.
Because there is an obligation, I guess, that is now weighing upon the both of our souls that I don't think we can sidestep any longer, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because it's time, and I struggle to say this just because it's hard. It's time for the Reckless to Talk lightning round.
Oh boy, I've been training for this. I'm ready.
Good. You are already more prepared than some. But for you and for any listeners who may or may not know or just want to be reminded, the lightning round are the same questions we ask to every one of our guests in the exact same order. There are no wrong answers other than like lying, just because that's just lame and not fun. They can be as long as you want. They can be as short as you want, including yes, no. I don't have a good answer for that. And I will pause. I will nod respectfully. And then we'll move on to the next question. Drac.
Yes.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
For the Reckless Attack lightning round?
I'm ready.
I hope so. I hope so. First question. Is your glass half full or half empty?
Half full.
What excites you creatively, spiritually, and or emotionally?
Anime, I think, yeah.
What does not excite you creatively, spiritually, and or emotionally?
Oh, that's a tough one. Traffic. Yeah.
Ooh. I remain silent, impartial, but also, ooh, good one. What is your favorite sound?
Oh, my friends laughing. I love when my friends laugh to the point where they look and sound ridiculous, because then I know that they've lost all inhibitions. I've really hit that funny bone.
What sound do you hate?
I think babies crying.
Reasonable. What is your favorite word?
Defenestration.
You rattled that off immediately, and I respect the hell out of you for doing so.
I love that word. It's the act of throwing someone out of the window.
Mm-hmm. What is your least favorite word?
I don't know. I don't think I have one.
Yeah. Legitimate answer. What tabletop role-playing game or D&D, et cetera, monster or antagonist have you not faced or run that you would love to?
I would love to. I haven't faced or run this, but I'd love to go against the classic, in cartoons where there's like the main cast, and then there's like a parody version of the main cast that you have to like compete with.
Yes.
So, like the buff guy and the buff guy that they're trying to compete with. Like, I really want to do that in a TTRPG campaign. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
I love that answer. What is your favorite adventure of all time? And this can be one you've read, one you wrote, one that you played in or ran, or it could be 1999's The Mummy, whatever it means to you.
Honestly, thinking about mentioning The Mummy, so I'm like, okay, cool, I can mention shows. Yeah. I really loved the Doctor Who episode, Amy's Choice. It was a really, really interesting episode and really interesting story that I think I've never seen anything like it before, so I really enjoyed watching that.
What is your favorite TTRPG character of all time? And again, similarly, can be one of yours. It can be an NPC. It can be someone you watched. It can be, again, whatever it means to you.
I'm going to be a little bit narcissistic and say one of my own characters.
Yeah.
Barugash. They were a Medusa-type Gorgon character. It was definitely one of the characters that I felt the most proud of as I played.
Drac, last question. What gives you hope?
Not to sound sappy, but...
Are you kidding? I asked that question begs for sappiness. You are very safe.
Honestly, being able to tell stories and roleplay with a lot of my friends. It's a very I think it's innately very hopeful, and it makes me feel very hopeful every time I get to do it.
Drac, congratulations. Because you have not only made it to the end of the Reckless Talk lightning round, but you've made it to the end of Reckless Talk itself. Thank you so much for all of your lovely insight and time and just presence. And as a reward for your persistence, your triumphs, and kind of just generally emerging on the other side of this gauntlet, could you please remind everyone who you have been, where they can find you, how to support you, all that good stuff?
Yes, I am Drac or Drakoniques. You can find me on all socials at Drakoniques. That's DRAKONIQUES. And honestly, the way to support me is, I guess, follow me on all of this stuff. Watch some of all the projects I've been involved in on and off camera. And I don't know, tell me your favorite Doctor Who villain at some point. Just at me and tell me your favorite Doctor Who villain. Call to action. Everyone, tell Drac that Reckless Attack sent you. Well, thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye. Bye.